Welcome back for another ride across South Dakota High School basketball, our weekly show called Inside the 605 that covers everything that happened in the last 7 days, what's happening right now, and what's about to happen in South Dakota hoops. I'm Jason Andera of 605 Sports, and let's get started with some headlines and some highlights from the last 7 days of hoops. And we're going to start from last Thursday night when Sioux Falls Christian took on Dakota Valley. It was a battle of unbeatens, and Sioux Falls Christian ends up getting the victory 60-48 on the road. Both teams' biggest challenge of the year. Sioux Falls Christian came out hot in that game, and they finished strong. In the middle of the game, it was a very evenly matched game. Ruth Dvorak led the Chargers with 18. Maya Nelson and Leslie Setzer both scored double digits. That put Sioux Falls Christian at 13-0, and since then have won 2 more games to be a commanding 15-0 to lead Class A. Friday, the biggest news came out of Sioux Falls, where the defending champions from Mitchell took their game to the Lincoln Gym, and Lincoln was undefeated on the year, number 1. Mitchell was in search for a signature victory. Well, they got it. A big performance from Marcus Talley to set the tone early. Even though Colton Smith was injured in part of this game, had to leave the game with an apparent leg injury, he came back and gave them a jolt of energy in the second half. The defense was outstanding for Mitchell all game long. They ended up getting the 69-58 win, handing Lincoln their first loss of the season. Despite beating Lincoln, they did not jump them in the polls. They stay at number 3. They're up from 4 a week ago, but stay at number 3, and Lincoln drops to number 2. On Saturday, one of the biggest games happened in Huron. Sacred Hoops Classic. And in that game, it was Parkston, the number 2 team in Class B, taking on Vermilion, not in the rankings in Class A, but considered one of the better teams. And it was Parkston who owned Vermilion early on. They had an 11-point lead going into the fourth quarter when Vermilion absolutely turned it on. Taylor Roovers, their young point guard, had a big end to the game. A steal, and then set up the offense, goes down to the baseline, and hits the game winner for a 55-54 win over Parkston at the Sacred Hoops Classic. Also on Saturday in boys hoops, we had a big game going on between the DAC-12 and NEC Clash. One of the headliners of that game was Hamlin taking on West Central. And West Central played Hamlin as tough as anybody has this year and forced them into a really low-scoring affair. It was close at the end of almost every quarter, and at the end of regulation, it was tied as we went to overtime. And in overtime, again, not much scoring in this one, but in double overtime, it was the Hamlin Chargers who took control of this game. Easton Neuendorf finished with 16 points to lead the way for the Chargers as they eked out a 5-point victory against West Central. In the loss, Connor Mebius, the sophomore, continues to have a big year, a 27-point game in that loss. Speaking of big games, let's go to our top performers list, the game changers from the last 7 days. And we'll start with boys this time. A returner to the list, Colby Flowers, came up with a huge performance on Tuesday to beat Andy Central, 30 points, 15 rebounds in their 70-41 win. Trey Hansen had a trio of big games in the last 7 days for Vermilion. A 31-point game against Del Rapids, a 25.9 rebound game against Sturgis, a Class AA team, and then on Tuesday night against Beersford, another 20-point game. So that's 3 20-plus point games in the span of the last 7 days for Trey Hansen. Another Hansen had a big week. Nick Hansen with 24 points against Centerville to get a 61-52 win. And then Tuesday night, adding another 25-point win to his list of credentials. Kason Kioff of Langford ended up with 40 points, hitting 8 3-pointers, but it wasn't quite enough to get the victory. They lost 69-67 to Northwestern through no fault of Kioff, the junior, with a big day. Connor Mebius, we talked about his 27-point performance against Hamlin earlier on Saturday, came out with a huge game again on Tuesday night as his team railed Tri-Valley 78-46. He came up with 31 points in the contest. Caden Montana, another 30-point contest on the week. Stanley County's star went for 32 points in a 63-49 win on Tuesday against Todd County. Luke Olson of Pierre, we annexed one game from the last 7 days, actually 9 days ago, because we missed him last week, but a 29-point performance against Aberdeen where he missed just 4 shots, 11 of 14 from the field, just 1 miss from the free throw stripe. Big game for Luke Olson of Pierre. Thanks for the nomination, by the way. Lucas Pesky of Iroquois Lake Preston got it done against James Valley Christian. He put up 32, 7 assists, 7 steals in their victory over James Valley Christian. In the loss, James Valley Christian had Jared Wallman, who went off with 36 points. So 2 30-point scorers in the same game. High scoring, fun to watch. It was Pesky getting the win, but Wallman getting the most points in the game. Grant Wilkinson, similar to Trey Hansen, put up 3 20-plus point games in the span of the last 7 days. He started out Friday night against Coleman Egan, had a big game with 26 points, 17 boards. Followed it up on Saturday night at the Heritage Classic with 26 points and 12 rebounds in their win over Sioux Valley. And then Monday night put the icing on the cake with a 29-point game, the highest output for Grant Wilkinson of the week. And a nice little tidy 15 boards to go with it. Wesley Whitler has been on fire lately, but he put up a 30-point, 20-plus rebound game against Warner. Those are 2 keys that'll get you on the Game Changers list. 30-point games, 20 rebound games. He had both in the same game against Warner in a 77-51 win. Time to look at our Game Changers on the girls' side, and again, a packed list. We have a smaller font than usual to get as many players on this list as possible, and still probably not quite enough. How about Braley Bordewijk from Corsica Stickney on Tuesday night? 1 assist shy of a triple-double in their win over Burke. 28 points, 11 boards, 9 assists. Liz Boshi back on the list for Sanborn Central Woonsocket. Put up a 34-point game against Wessington Springs in a commanding win. And then also came out Tuesday night against Ethan, one of the top 5 teams in the class. Put up 26 of the team's 45 points against the Rustlers to get the victory. So back-to-back great games for Liz. Kaylee Craddock of Sioux Valley, back-to-back 25-plus point games, a 26-point, 8-rebound effort against Beersford. And then Tuesday night, even though they lost to Dakota Valley, she played well, 25 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. Lennox Dupree, her last 2 games were electric. A Tuesday ago with a 28-point, 12-rebound game against Aberdeen, and then added another 20-point effort on Tuesday night against Harrisburg. 2 quality wins for that Pierre team, heading in the right direction. Shania Ferguson of Lakota Tech, 34 points on Tuesday night, hitting 4 3-pointers, but almost more impressive, she's currently on a streak of 24 made free throws in a row. We don't want to jinx it, Shania, but that is unbelievable. Great accomplishment for you and for Lakota Tech. Addison Heinge of Wilmot, she's had several 20-plus point games, even a few 40-plus point games, another 44-point performance with 9 steals, 6 rebounds, 6 assists in a big win over Ortonville. Crystal Lonhager put up a 30-point game for Sisseton, did some damage against Phillip, a solid Class B team at the Heritage Classic on Saturday. Taylor Rivers of Vermilion, 3 big games in her last 7 days. 29-point performance against Del Rapids on Thursday. Had the buzzer beater with 19 points on Saturday against Parkston, and added another 20-point game with 22 against Beersford on Tuesday night. Max Scott returns to the Game Changers list, this time putting up a 30-point performance. 31 points, 5 boards, 4 steals, 3 assists against Wall. And Addie Stephenson rounds out the list for Hamlin, back-to-back 26-point games as they beat Sisseton and beat Millbank in the last week. Great performances as always. Make sure to contact me. You can get me at either of my handles on Instagram or Twitter to tell me about some of the great performances, because we don't have access to all the stats. We do the best we can to contact coaches and read up the write-ups and everything we can do, but we depend on you guys for nominations as well. All right, time to go to Ryan Deal. The real deal every week on Inside the 605 is 605 Sports Ryan Deal. And Ryan, You guys do a great job of covering different types of stories, and it's nice to see you give recognition to a few teams that don't get a lot of it. Tell us about Rich Winter's story on one of those teams.
Yeah, Teoshpatopa girls, located on the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, kind of my neck of the woods where I grew up. So familiar with that team. Last week we talked about the Lemon Boys, a team that doesn't get a lot of recognition. I think the Thunderhawks fall under that category. Just kind of quietly humming along to a 12-3 season. I think it's been a long time since they've been able to piece together a season like this. So I've seen them play in person a few different times this year. Not very deep, but their starting five is pretty solid. They won their bracket at the Dakota Nation Invitational earlier this season, and at the recent Dakota Oyate Challenge, got second at that one. Ran into a good Omaha Nation team from Nebraska, so then I have to play those guys again, obviously. But I think it's a team that maybe some people should maybe kind of keep an eye on. I definitely think that they will come out of their region, and then you get in the Sodak, and you never know. It's all about the draw, but certainly a fun team to watch. And yeah, Rich Winter highlighted them just today, so people can check that story out and keep an eye on the Thunderhawks as the season plays out.
Good stuff, Ryan. Let's talk about boys class AA. I'm interested, as you putting the polls together and receiving votes from all the media members, how close was that AA vote this week? And you could really make a case for either Mitchell, Lincoln, or Brandon Valley. What are your thoughts on some of the best teams in class boys AA?
Yeah, AA it's gonna be fun to see how this plays out down the stretch. Last week Lincoln and Mitchell played, and I live in Mitchell, and there was some people going into that game for Mitchell that weren't giving the Colonels much shot going into that game. But then, boy, the Colonels went on the road, picked up a nice win, and then on our side of things, when it comes to the rankings and the polls, it just kind of threw a wrench into things because then you had multiple teams getting first place votes and all those sorts of things. And I was just saying a little bit ago that at one point last week when I was doing the polls, three teams were tied at number one with Mitchell, Brandon Valley, and Lincoln, and then Harrisburg was receiving a first place vote as well. So right now we're seeing a lot of parity, I guess, at the top with AA boys, and hopefully that means we're in for a fun state tournament as we get closer to that and everything.
And as always, Ryan, you give us a couple games that you're looking forward to. Let's start with girls basketball. We've got a Thursday night battle between two DAC 12 teams. The defending champs in Class A going against the current number ones. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the DAC 12, it seems like every week there's always big matchups, ones we always kind of circle and keep tabs on. And Sioux Falls Christian and Vermilion is obviously another one of those. Yeah, like you said, Vermilion won the state championship last year, returned a lot off of that team, taking some losses, but obviously playing a tough schedule. Maybe drop down a little bit in some of the standings and the rankings and all that stuff, and some people aren't really keeping an eye on them like we should, but they'll have a tough test against Sioux Falls Christian. Sioux Falls Christian, a lot like their boys, is kind of humming along here. Boy, it looks like they just play a pretty strong defensive crew over there for Sioux Falls Christian. So we'll see how Taylor Roovers and Brooke Jensen, how they match up against the Chargers. But that's certainly one you kind of want to keep an eye on, because A girls, to me, it will be interesting, because I think it's going to be similar to last year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Sioux Falls Christians, at the top right now. We'll see how it goes against Vermilion, defending champs and all that stuff. So that'll be a fun one to keep an eye on.
And in boys action, let's look at Wessington Springs taking on Wolsey Wessington. These two teams locked it up earlier this year. It was a great game. You were at that game, and you're looking forward to the sequel.
Yeah, Wessington Springs and Wolsey Wessington played, like you said, in the 281 championship game here not too long ago, and that was one of those games I was there. I shot some pictures and was kind of working on some other things, and I look up, and it's like a 25-point lead for Wolsey Wessington, and then all of a sudden you look down, and then it's a 6-point lead for Wolsey Wessington. So just a crazy comeback that Wessington Springs was able to piece together and win that game. So obviously Wolsey Wessington has this one circled on their calendar. That they want revenge, and it's a big rivalry game. Those teams are close to each other and in the same conference and all those sorts of things, and just some great athletes on both sides of the court. So that's certainly one you want to keep an eye on in Class B, boys.
Thank you, Ryan. Always good to check in with Ryan Deal of 605 Sports. Let's get on to the biggest games coming up over the next 7 days. And we've got some good ones, especially on the girls' side this week. We'll start there. A couple honorable mentions to start things with. Usually two teams that are either receiving votes or ranked will get into the top 5 lists. A couple honorable mentions this week at Sanborn Central Woonsocket, coming off a big win over Ethan, feel like a ranked team in B. They take on Parkston on Thursday. That's going to be a Class B absolute battle. And then also Dakota Valley taking on EPJ, 2 top 5 teams in Class A. Didn't make my top 5 list, but definitely honorable mentions. So in at number 5, you must be wondering, how good are these games? Well, they're very good. And Stevens takes a couple of these games. They take on Brandon Valley on Saturday, and then the night before, they take on O'Gorman. So they'll play number 2 and number 1 teams in the class of AA as the number 5 team in the state. A huge test for Talia Porter and the rest of the Stevens Raiders. They've had a great team effort all season long, and this is their chance to see if they can contend with some of the best teams in AA. In at number 3, Dakota Valley taking on Hamlin. Well, they will play the number 5 team. Dakota Valley will play the number 5 team on Thursday, and then Saturday take on the number 4 team in Class A as they take on Hamlin. This one should be very evenly matched. Dakota Valley has shown that they can play with some good teams. Coming off of last week's loss to Sioux Falls Christian, bounced back with a win over a really good Sioux Valley team, and now will be tested by Hamlin, a team that's only lost a couple of games this year, and Addie Stephenson coming on really strong for them. Can't wait to see some of the stars in this one. And the number 2 game features the one that Ryan Deal talked about, the defending champs Vermilion taking on the number 1 team in Class A right now, Sioux Falls Christian. And Sioux Falls Christian continues to have tough game after tough game after tough game. And now they'll see what they can do Thursday night as they take on Vermilion. For Vermilion, coming off of a couple of good wins, Taylor Rivers playing really well, Brooke Jensen playing really well. They will see if they have enough depth to compete with one of the best teams in the state. And our number 1 game coming up in the next 7 days. How about next Tuesday night? Can't wait for this one. Washington taking on Brandon Valley. And these are 2 teams that are just about ready to play some of the toughest basketball they have all year. Washington hasn't had the toughest schedule yet, but they're really going to ramp things up here in the next week or so. And their head coach, Jamie Parrish, says we always have to be playing our best ball mid-February to see where we're at as we make that push into the playoffs. Well, that test starts Tuesday as they take on Brandon Valley. Top 5 games on the boys' side, not as many ranked teams playing against each other, but some very intriguing battles. And let's start with Dakota Valley taking on Vermilion. Dakota Valley had been a top 5 team most of the year, dropped down to receiving votes. They take on Vermilion, a team on the up. We talked about Trey Hansen and the way he's played lately. He's going to have his hands full with a couple really good Dakota Valley players. Can't wait to see how that one plays out. Wessington Springs taking on Wolsey Wessington, the game that Ryan Deal alluded to. Had played just a couple weeks ago in the 281 championship game. A back-and-forth game. Both teams had huge runs in that game. It was Wessington Springs getting the 2-point victory. Can Wolsey Wessington at home avenge that loss? We will see. Spearfish taking on Mitchell. That's Saturday. They'll be coming right off of a game against Huron, and we'll have to take Mitchell on the very next day. That's going to be a challenge for them. But Mitchell looking like a team that's headed in the right direction. They figured out some things on their bench. They are playing deeper into their bench. They are playing better offensively here in the last week than they have all season long. We'll get a big challenge from Spearfish. Lincoln takes on O'Gorman. They played just a couple weeks ago, and O'Gorman lost by over 30. It was a running clock in that game. They have some revenge on their minds and showing that they can play with one of the better teams in the state. They'll be at their home gym too, so that should help a little bit, as Lincoln has been on a tear since that loss to Mitchell, destroying T and destroying Watertown in the last 2 games. And the number 1 game to look forward to in the next 7 days, again, next Tuesday, Brandon Valley at Washington. Brandon Valley, the newly anointed number 1 team, taking on Washington. Coming into the year, we thought maybe they could be the number one team. We're one of the contenders in AA. They'll have a chance to prove that. And Brandon Valley, they will play a much tougher schedule here down the stretch. It starts right here with Washington, and we'll see if they've got what it takes to go on the road and beat a really good Class AA team. I'll be there on the call next Tuesday night at the Washington Gym for that one. You can check out liveticket.tv to find out how you can watch. That'll do it for another edition of Inside the 605. So glad you are here to join us. Always fun to talk hoops across the state of South Dakota, and only a few more weeks left to do it, so we'll enjoy it while we can. Until next week, this is Jason Andera signing off.